So we started a little bit late, which means I have 17 minutes versus my 16 minutes versus my original 20 to talk about. We are here to talk about the Salvation Army National Standards of Excellence. That's what I'm going to be speaking to for the next few moments. And I just want to get a quick sense of the room. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Salvation Army National Standards of Excellence before. Raise your hand. Okay, all right. All the people that have been around for a while, none of the new people, which means that I will start from scratch. And this part of my commentary is going to be picking up where we left off this morning, because I mentioned the National Standards of Excellence a little bit earlier. And I'm going to spend a few minutes getting into the details of the Standards of Excellence. Where'd they come from? What purpose do they have? Or why should you care? And then a couple of examples of what the standards are themselves, okay? So remember earlier today, if you were around, the top 3 things that officers in that survey that I shared said were their biggest challenges to building and sustaining advisory organizations. The top 3 were, we don't know how to recruit new members, we are not sure what a good advisory organization looks like, and then number 3, a lack of training. So it was really number 2, we don't know what a good advisory organization looks like, that was used to create the National Standards of Excellence. So I'm going to give it a little bit of background, then we're going to dive into the standards themselves, okay? On the National Advisory Board, there's committees, like the ones that you've heard about from Mike and from other people. Your advisory organization should have committees that are focused on doing certain things or setting certain priorities for the Corps, for the territory, or for the division. One of the committees on the national board is the Advisory Organization's Development Committee. So this is a group of national board members that get together and think of strategies and ways to help develop and grow the community of advisory organizations of the Salvation Army throughout the United States. Well, they spent about a year, and I know that because I spent that year with them, really thinking about what would be most valuable for officers to help them create and grow boards. And one of the decisions that was made was the National Standards of Excellence. So what the National Standards of Excellence is a set of guidelines that provides prescriptive guidance to you as an officer on what your advisory organizations should look like. There is one for boards and councils, there is one for Echelon, and there is one for women's auxiliary chapters. And so what it does is it takes the guesswork out of what your advisory organization should look like so that you don't have to focus on that, and you can focus on what I call the 2 R's, 2 things that you're going to walk away with that are really helpful for you. So think about it. As an officer, if you go into a Corps or you get moved to a Corps and you're looking at your board and you're spending all of your time trying to figure out how many members should I have? How many meetings should I have? What should I ask from my board members? That's going to take you away from focusing on the things that really do matter, and it's going to waste your time and stop you from doing really special things with your board. Your board is there, as Mike said earlier, your board is there to serve. They are there to make impact. They're not there so that you can just serve them lunch or steal coffee. That's not like why the board exists. So the National Standards of Excellence are valuable to you because they take the guesswork out of what your advisory organization should look like, give you guidance and a charter on how to build out your board, so that way you could focus on what I just referred to a moment ago as the 2 R's. Now write this down. Every relationship that an officer has with their board or their board leader should focus on the 2 R's. The first R is relationship. The second R is results. If you as an officer spend the majority of your time in your relationship with your board on either building or strengthening your relationship with the community or driving results for the Salvation Army, you're going to have a great relationship. And like I said, if you're spending all of your time figuring out what a board should look like and how it should operate, you're not going to be able to focus on those two other things. So with that, and if you look up on the screen, you will see the standards of excellence that have been written for a board or a council. Now, here's one thing to know about the standards of excellence. I'm trying to do this as a crash course. Advisory Organization Standards of Excellence 101. If you are a command that has an advisory organization and you are practicing all of these standards of excellence, there's a couple of them that have an asterisk next to them on the guide. The reason why a standard would have an asterisk next to it is because you need to prove the documentation that you are practicing that standard. Because the reason why you need documentation is because as part of this program, you can apply to become a nationally recognized Salvation Army advisory organization. And as you see here, looking at the example of our friend Larry Carmichael, who was in Sacramento at the time, I think now he's in Napa, he was running an advisory organization that was practicing all of these standards, and he, as part of a pilot program, became a nationally recognized advisory organization. And I could tell you firsthand, as having worked with a lot of officers and board chairs, this national recognition provides an energy and a focus and an enthusiasm. And I'm not sure about you, but when you're working with someone like a board leader, the more that can unite you, the more that can give you the same bullseye and provide something for all of you to be marching in the same direction, the better. And the National Standards of Excellence is an example of something that can do that for you, your board, and your board leader. So the National Standards of Excellence program is broken apart in two categories. There's the meets standards category, and then there's the exceeds standards category. The meets standards category is also referred to as the silver level of certification, and then the exceed standards is referred to as the gold level certification. I know all of you are overachievers and you don't want the silver medal, so you probably want gold. But all joking aside, it's really important to have an awareness around where your advisory organization is at and which level of certification is best for them. Because if you try to be too overly ambitious, I don't want to steal your thunder, but if you try to go too fast as a board, if you try to do too much and you're not really going in the right order at the right speed, then it could kind of backfire on you. And so you want to, when you're introducing these standards of excellence to your board leadership and to your board, get their feedback about which level of certification, because as you could see, there's 10 for meets expectation and then an additional 4 for exceeds. And once you lift up the hood and you start looking around and asking yourself, how many of these are we actually practicing? And how many of them will we be able to incorporate over whatever period of time? Sometimes it could be an energizer for the board. Sometimes it could be a little much. So you want to have an awareness. You don't want to be tone deaf around where the board is at and what level of certification it wants. That's like a pro tip that you want to be really mindful of, okay? Now, the way I position this to board leaders is, okay, here's the standards of excellence. Which level of certification do we want to be at? And then do we want to crawl, walk, or run in pursuit of these standards? That's a really helpful framing of it, right? Because you have some boards that's like, let's do it. Let's do gold. Let's do tomorrow. And other people are like, I need about a month just to digest that. So you want to have some awareness on the standards of excellence in terms of how you bring it to a board. So that was like a crash course on the standards themselves. I'm going to do a little bit of a recap, and I'm going to share some examples of the standards, what you need to do to qualify to be able to apply to become nationally recognized, and then what the process is, okay? So to recap, the National Standards of Excellence were created by the National Advisory Board. They were approved by Commissioners Conference, and they have been announced to the field throughout the U.S. for going on a year now. We have seen this be one of the most exciting and tangible things that officers have responded to in a really long time. Little bragging rights here because Colleen's in the room, but I happen to know firsthand that the Western Territory has had the most amount of applications and certifications in the U.S. Come on, give it up. We're among friends. And there's a reason for that, is because officers are saying that helps us. That makes our job easier. That provides a common language for me and my board leadership to speak. And in today's environment, we need more of that than we've ever needed in the past. So it's available to you. Like I mentioned before, there is a website called AOHub, AOHUB.org, and you can download this guide in addition to a lot of other resources that are available. But we've seen it be an energizing, tangible, beneficial thing to not only officers, but boards themselves. People are saying we want to learn it, we want to implement it, and we want to become nationally recognized. 2 levels of certification, silver or meets expectations, or gold or exceeds expectations. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of them just to demystify the process here with the 5 minutes I have left. Okay, so looking at the meets standards, you'll see that at the very top, in order to qualify to become recognized at the silver level, you must meet 9 of the 10 standards to receive the silver award. So out of all 10 things under the meets expectations, you got to be doing 9 of them. 3 examples. Number 1, you have to have at least 9 members. So in order for you to be qualified to apply for silver recognition, you have to have at least 9 members. I love that because it provides a baseline of membership. Because some officers are like, do I have 6 members? Do I have 15 members? You need to have at least 9. You see how it provides more prescriptive guidance on the membership that you need to maintain? So that's one standard that I really like as an example. Number 7, your nominating efforts, your recruiting efforts have diversity as one intentional goal for recruitment. Diversity includes gender, ethnicity, skills, and industry. So as a board, you have to make it a point to try to bring in diversity into your board, but you just have to have one goal. So do we want our board to have more woman representation? Do we want our board to have more representation of industry? Maybe there's a big industry in the community that you operate in and you want someone from the agricultural or from the technology industry. So you have to have at least one goal around diversity, but it could be diversity around any number of subjects. And I think one thing that you'll notice about the standards is they're not providing like a hard mandate that you got to do this and you got to do that. It's really providing general guidance so that you as the officer have the autonomy to do what's best for your corps or your division. That's what I really love about the standards. So that was example number 2 is diversity. Example number 10, the advisory board or council has a rotating membership structure whereby members serve and are evaluated in 3-year increments in terms of involvement and contribution. So it basically means that, hey, generally speaking, every 3 years, your board members have a discussion with you and your board to say, how's it going? Should you continue? Should you sunset? And it's just an active conversation. It didn't say you have to kick them off. It didn't say that there's a hard stop at the 3 years. It just says that you have an ongoing evaluation of membership, and that 3 years is the guidance that you've subscribed to. Everybody good so far? Okay, so you must meet 9 of the 10, and you must demonstrate that you're practicing those with every standard that has an asterisk on it, because what you do is you actually go to the aohub.org, and you can click apply, and it's going to ask you to upload the document showing you that you have a roster of 9, showing that you run your meetings a certain way. And then when you hit apply, it goes to your divisional leader for review and approval. Once they say yay, it goes to your territorial leaders for review and approval. And once they say yes, it goes to the national headquarters more as a formality at the national level. And the minute that all 3 approve you, you receive this certificate on the spot. Right there. Immediately. I want to give everybody a plaque, but we understand like timing is of the essence, so you receive that certification, and we're starting to see them grow and grow and grow and grow. And everybody who's been involved in this, they're relatively happy. It's helpful for them. On the exceed side, you'll see that the requirement is that in order to qualify for the gold, you must first qualify for the silver 9 of 10. And then on top of that, you must meet at least 3 of the 4 exceed standards to receive gold. It's a higher level. It's for someone who's operating with a little bit more rigor and sophistication. And 2 examples I'll share on the exceed side is number 1, that the advisory board or council annually solicit at least 1 individual or corporate donation for the Salvation Army outside of their personal giving. So all that means is that a board member is willing to pick up the phone and say, hey, Joey, we know you have a local consulting firm. We'd like for you to be a sponsor of our Red Kettle Kickoff. It's not that you get the donation, it's that you solicit it. So again, do you see how it's like a friendly yet still effective way of utilizing your board members? So 1 per year, every one of your members has to at least try to solicit a donation outside of their personal giving. Number 3 on exceeds is that advisory board or council has adopted a strategic plan and has integrated goals and action steps of the plan into the committee work. Progress updates are provided at regular meetings. The plan is refreshed and reconstituted at intervals not more than every 3 years. Mike mentioned that that's something that they do on the Torrance Corps. The committees are actively feeding into the strategic plan of the board. Okay? So in closing, the session is not done. I'm just done. Okay? In closing, if you're an existing officer in the field, or if you're a new officer that will go into the field one day, this is going to be a really good friend of yours. Number 1, when you go to your board leaders, especially the stubborn ones, you can say, guess what? We have a new governance framework, and we really think you're going to like it. But even if you don't, we have a new governance framework. And this is what our board needs to look like. And as a result of that, we can become a nationally recognized board. Number 2, this provides you explicit guidance on what your board should look like, so you don't have to worry about that. And you can worry about the 2, who? The 2 what? Which stood for?
Relationship and results.
Awesome. Relationship and results. That's what I would rather focus on instead of like, do I have 10 or 12 members? Okay? That's number 2. And then number 3, board members are competitive. These are people that build businesses. Sorry, that threw me off. Board members are competitive. These are people who have led organizations and built businesses and lead. So they love the pursuit of something. They love to win. And this allows them to do that. Standards of excellence are something that I'm really proud of the Salvation Army for approving because it's been helpful for officers. And with that, we're going to have an awesome opportunity to hear about Echelon from my friend Susan. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just switch gears to this PowerPoint deck for mine. There we go. Let me introduce myself. My name is Susan Barton, and I work as a consultant. But my role as a consultant at the moment is I'm working for national headquarters as the National Echelon consultant. So Echelon is this thing I live, eat, and breathe. And so today I wanted to have an opportunity to share with you a little bit about what Echelon is, what we're hoping to do and accomplish, and what that might mean for you in your context and capacity. I've been a part of the Salvation Army here in the West my entire life. Grew up here in Southern California, have known Commissioners Riley since I was a little girl. So this is something that just boosts my soul, right? I want this to work because I think it's really good for the Army. So we recently did a national field call for the Community Relations and Development Department at National Headquarters about Echelon, and we were talking about it. And the first thing we did was we asked a poll question that said, why does your local unit not have an Echelon chapter? And my anticipation, we gave them kind of 5 options, right? Too many other higher priorities, don't know enough about Echelon, this, that, and the other. And my full anticipation was that the majority of responses would be, there are too many other higher priorities. Officers are busy people. We get it. Like there's a lot going on in your world and you have a lot of hats to wear. But surprisingly, the most dominant response was, I just don't know enough about Echelon to know what to do with it. Like, I'm not sure what this is. I've heard of this thing, but I don't know enough about it. And the officer I had sharing on the call was a DYS in the Central Territory, and he said the same thing. He's an Echelon liaison and was having the same conversation with his officer colleagues. Tell me about this thing about Echelon. I keep hearing this word, but I don't know enough about it. So that's my goal today, is to tell you a little bit more about Echelon, and so you could maybe have a bit of a picture why this might be useful in your unit. So Echelon is the Salvation Army's response to engaging emerging professionals. It was founded in Dallas back in 2011. So it has actually been around for quite a number of years, but it's been slowly growing. And in Dallas, they found that there was advisory board members who had children and grandchildren that wanted to connect, but they didn't want to be in their parents' or grandparents' advisory board. They wanted something that was a little bit more active, that something was a little beyond providing the wise counsel and maybe fundraising focus that the advisory board offered. They wanted to dig their hands in a little deeper. And so Echelon was born, and although it wasn't called Echelon initially, but that's what it grew out of. So what is Echelon? It's this community of difference makers, people who want to be active in their communities, that focus on networking, volunteerism, and fundraising for their local Salvation Army in their local context. And so it can have a lot of flexibility and context based on what's happening in your community and where your appointment is, what you end up doing. Echelon fits the need of your area. So this is Echelon's mission, right? We want to mobilize that next generation. The target age range for Echelon is 25 to 40. There are not hard and fast, rigid rules around the age. That's just the age bracket we're kind of targeting, because by the time someone's between 35 and 40, you're hoping they progress up into the advisory board. They've reached that kind of more stable part of their career where they have more capacity to give back. But our 25 to 35 to 40-year-olds, it looks a little different. They're in a whole different life stage, and the way in which we meet their needs looks a little different. But we found that those three key elements, networking, fundraising, and volunteering, are the way in which we capture them and help them feel connected to their communities. They gather together. What does an Echelon program do? They gather together regularly. Typically, they would meet monthly-ish, depending, again, on your context, to build a relationship with each other, to engage one another. They network amongst themselves. That's one element of the networking. The second element of the networking is networking with the advisory board. They want to be connected with the other professionals in their community. They want to gain and learn and leverage those relationships so they have people to look up to and follow their example. But building that community, and then they serve together, right? That volunteerism piece is really critical. It builds connections so that the chapters feel like they are making a meaningful difference in their community. They typically select where they serve based on the passions of the people in their particular chapter. And that can look different in different areas. But the biggest critical factor is understanding the why, right? Why would you do this? Why does this matter? Because if you get the why, you'll get them in the door, right? They have to know, they have to understand the motivation behind it. I don't need to tell any Salvation Army cadet or officer in the room that the needs are greater than ever before, right? We all know it, kind of the post-pandemic reality, the inflation reality. There are just great needs out there. We need volunteers to help us deliver the mission. It's huge. The emerging professionals are looking for a way to give back. Young millennials and Gen Zs in particular want to get engaged. They want to get their hands dirty. We're seeing that. And by no means am I implying that those in older generations, which includes myself, or advisory board members don't want to engage. But we are seeing with this particular age bracket that they want to be hands-on. So in Echelon chapters, that looks like restocking food pantries, renovating rooms in the Army's shelter in that community, serving 5-star meals to clients experiencing homelessness. Like we have our Milwaukee chapter that every year they do a 5-star dining experience. They bring in local chefs from restaurants. They set out the dining area in their shelter with white linens, dressed to the nines, and they invite their clients in and serve them a 5-star meal so they can just enjoy that experience for an evening. It looks like hands-on ministry. It's the ministry you're being trained to do or that you in the field are already doing. This is what we see our Echelon folks want to be a part of. They want to feel valued. And that speaks to the third bullet point. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And I know no organization like the Salvation Army that connects you to something larger than yourself. Yes, the kingdom message, but the international network that the Salvation Army opens up. I can walk down the street in more than 100 countries and have somebody understand the Salvation Army uniform or the S's on the shoulder, right? They know what that means. And when we recruit Echelon volunteers to the cause, they're suddenly stunned when they learn the bigger picture of the Army, right? This idea of, wow, I didn't realize the Salvation Army did all of that. And this gives us a chance to tell them that message. And they feel a part of something, that they're making a difference for the kingdom. I do want to affirm what was shared earlier about that mission alignment with your members. So you want to recruit widely and bring them all in. And as people rise up into leadership ranks, we want to make sure they're aligned, that they understand that this is the heartbeat of the mission. This is what we're about. What's the reason behind what we do? As I mentioned already, you all have plenty to do, or you will have plenty to do in the field. I'm sure you're busy, those of you who are still here in training school, but here's some of the benefits that we see coming out of those. Put the time and the energy and the effort into developing an echelon in your community. You become the place that they do their professional networking. They can meet on site in your facility, and suddenly you are that place where that happens. We find most chapters do a variety of meeting places, sometimes in restaurants, sometimes at the core location. We usually advocate for at least once a quarter that it be on your facility or your property, so that they are exposed to your Salvation Army's local presence. But you become that place and enable that. But again, networking amongst themselves and with the advisory board. It gives you a new audience to share the Army's mission with. And nothing could be more important. Creative resource raising, you suddenly then tap into a new pool of volunteers that can help you with the work you're trying to accomplish for the kingdom, whether that's design services, tech professionals, whomever it is that you've recruited to be a part of your Echelon program. You suddenly have access to that new volunteer pool and the ability for them to be a part of that. They then become the voice of the Army to a whole new audience, right? They go out and tell the Army story to the people in their organization, in their families, in their communities, because they're bought into what you're doing. And finally, it develops a pipeline of future leaders for you. Our goal, our hope would be that people who come through the Echelon program, then as they progress in their career, move into your advisory board, so that you have a ready-made funnel of potential advisory board members that have all come through your Echelon program. So you suddenly have a really easy way for one piece of your recruiting. You're always going to externally recruit as well, but this suddenly you would have a whole group of people every year kind of funneling through that you could consider for advisory board membership. So what does Echelon look like nationally? At the moment, we have 37 chapters around the U.S. in the 4 territories. Our newest chapter that just chartered is in Greater New York, so that's New York City and in the Greater New York division in the east. But here in the west, there's chapters in Sacramento, Southern Nevada, Phoenix. We have 2 chapters in Hawaii. We have chapters rebuilding the post-pandemic, kind of that put a quash on a lot of Echelon momentum. So we have chapters rebuilding in Denver and San Diego and Anchorage. And then 2 chapters in development, which are Los Angeles and Colorado Springs. So there's some along the way. We've got Portland and San Francisco in the pipeline that they may be also potential chapters along the way. So you can see Echelon is a growing initiative. This has grown by, I think it's 7 chapters in the last year, and we have a target of 50 chapters in the next 18 months, hitting 50 chapters in the next 18 months. So what would it mean? When you get to your appointment, for those in the room or for those online where you're at, what do you actually need to start an Echelon chapter? And we found that it's a 3-legged stool. So if the part you sit on is your actual Echelon board, right? You think you have an advisory board. If you have an Echelon board, what do they need to be able to succeed? They need local officers who are invested in Echelon, that have decided and committed that this is an important priority to help move forward. You need a committed advisory board advocate or champion. Someone on your advisory board needs to understand the value and the power of engaging emerging professionals. So that person who can help say, yeah, we want to invite them to have a seat at the table. And then you need a dedicated staff support. So we ask that each Echelon chapter have some staff time dedicated to help support that chapter that can advocate and help navigate the Salvation Army systems. You would all understand and appreciate there are a lot of systems and bureaucracy in the Salvation Army, and they need someone to help navigate through that. I don't think there's a single example where the staff liaison is its own position. It's usually built into an existing position. So it's not suggesting you need to have an employee solely dedicated to Echelon, but it's a part of a volunteer coordinator's role, development, usually within the development department. This staff support helps make that chapter happen. And then you recruit your emerging professionals to be that board that want to launch this forward with you. There's a couple different models that we see at play, and all of them work. There's flexibility in Echelon, so you can make it contextualized to your local appointment. Some support a single Salvation Army program. I mentioned Milwaukee. They have picked one homeless shelter in their city, and that Echelon chapter solely fundraises, networks, supports that particular program because they're passionate about people experiencing homelessness. There's other chapters that, like our North Texas chapter in Dallas, that they rotate their supportive programs annually. Every year, they pick a new effort that they want to support. One year it might be homelessness. The next year it might be human trafficking, and they rotate each year based on the passions of their leaders. But typically, most chapters start by partnering with existing programs. They just help provide extra bandwidth and manpower to you as officers. By coming alongside doing back-to-school backpacks, helping with Angel Tree, whatever it looks like in your annual cycle of events in your local community, they come and provide manpower for that. I would say the most typical meeting pattern looks like monthly meetings, quarterly service events, and an annual or biannual fundraiser. Fundraising is most distinctly the third priority. Emerging professionals typically aren't in a career stage where they have a lot of financial bandwidth, so that we encourage chapters really to raise enough money to support their own activities. The idea is that they are not a drain on the Salvation Army. They are contributing back, but we are not looking for them to be over and above in their fundraising efforts actively. It's really about volunteerism and networking as the primary two efforts, and then fundraising, again, to help funnel their own activities so they're not spending the Salvation Army's money to accomplish their work. There's a national network of support. So for people who are looking to start a chapter, there are things out there to help you. We have an Echelon Leadership Council of 8 people. Commissioner Riley sits on that as an ex officio member, as a representative for Commissioners Conference, and they help set the national strategy for Echelon and help bring the pulse of what's happening locally together at a national level. And they meet at the same time as the National Advisory Board. There are 4 territorial representatives, one for each territory. That's kind of the territorial person responsible for Echelon to provide support, answer questions, help walk through processes. We offer quarterly field calls. We do a kettle takeover program during kettle season. So we ask on one particular day of the kettle season that the Echelon takes over and mans kettles and fundraises through that process. And we offer a leadership symposium where we bring all Echelon representatives together for a conference every other year. What does it look like to do this? And I'll go through this briefly because for most folks, this is getting into the granular stuff. But if you wanted to know what does it look like to actually launch an Echelon chapter, we have a 4-stage process that you can access online. SalvationArmyEchelon.org. So that's the national webpage for Echelon. And you go into resources and there's a new chapter application process. And it walks you through these 4 stages. What does it mean to put together a steering committee, establishing the kind of interest and momentum around it, the investigation process, who is going to do what does that look like, kind of gathering the right people, putting your strategy together, and then finalizing the structure you're going to use with your chapter. And that website, that online process, like the AO Hub for the Standards of Excellence, allows you to go online, see the steps you need to follow, upload your documents along the way, and it clicks you through approval through 4 phases, and getting ready to submit your charter application. The Standards of Excellence complements this really well because once your chapter is chartered, we have to have so for example, you have to have a minimum of 10 members to charter a chapter. The silver level of Standards of Excellence says you have to have 14 members. So this idea like you're going to grow just a little bit, you get your chapter chartered and you kind of get going, and then you can start to walk through the Standards of Excellence to see if your Echelon chapter meets those things so you can kind of reach that national recognition as well. So they kind of, you progress from one to the other. If you have any questions, I've listed here each of the territories representatives so you can see them, but here on our room, Mariana's here. Mariana Zumaya is the Western Territories representative responsible for Echelon, so she can answer any questions, but so can I, right? As the National Echelon consultant, I'm more than happy to jump on a Zoom call. Here in the West, I can actually meet with you face-to-face. I'm Los Angeles-based, and I love to talk anything Echelon. So that's along the way. If you want any additional information about Echelon, feel free to email us at the national email address. So it's echelon@USN, using the typical Salvation Army email structure. I check that email every day. You can also email me directly at susan.barton@USN. More than happy to answer questions. If there's someone who wants more information or a one-on-one conversation, more than happy to do that. I have 1 minute and 24 seconds left on my clock. If anybody has any questions about Echelon specifically, I'm more than happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll pass the baton over for Women's Auxiliary. But any questions in the room or online, I didn't give much warning for Q&A. Why don't I invite Holly Wagner to come forward, who's going to speak about the Women's Auxiliary, part of auxiliary organizations, and maybe there'll be time for a Q&A at the end. If anybody has one, feel free to throw it in the chat if you're online or in the room. We'll grab it then.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Steve, that was amazing. I learned a lot. See, that's one of those words when you first stepped onto a board and they talk Echelon, you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I learned so much from that. That was awesome. Thank you. Am I too old? Shoot. I'm actually going to bring up Teresa Hagerty, who's actually knows more about the Women's Auxiliary, and I'm just going to ask her some questions. But I want to read this statement. This is from a man named Matthew Arnold. He was an English poet, I think, English writer, and he said this. He said, if there ever comes a time when the women of the world come together purely and simply for the benefit of mankind, it will be a force such as the world has never known. So I just want to encourage you that rallying the chicks, rallying the women to do good things will be pretty awesome. So let's just talk about this. Here, go ahead, have a seat. This is Teresa Hagerty. She's the spunky half of Dick. Oh, I thought I broke something already. Okay, first of all, I just want to ask you a question. So you were on, like, in charge of the Women's Auxiliary a couple of times?
2 years.
2 years. Okay, so why did you do that?
First of all, my name is Teresa Hagerty, and I've been in Salvation Army when I married Hagerty. I did not know anything about Salvation Army. I thought it was where you go and throw your clothes that you don't want. So learning little by little, going to the meetings with him, I find out that it was amazing place to work. So I don't know how I begin the president. Somebody put me in a spot and I'm like, I don't even speak English. So how am I going to do this? So I find a really good friend of mine. She was a retired teacher and she became my secretary. She did all my work. So I'm really good at ask me questions, but I'm not a real good speaker. Pretty much is what everybody repeat over here. So she's going to ask me questions and I will answer, and then we go something like that.
Why did you want to get involved with the Women's Auxiliary? Why did you want to do that?
Somebody put me in the spot. I'm going to be the fun part of this talking. I'm not going to be like really talking in big terms. It was amazing because I want to be part of a woman that would like to do some work for Salvation Army, be volunteer. You ask me to go and speak in a public, and I go point my husband. He can do it. I will be cooking and hands-on, and I love it because they did an event in Modesto. I'm going to quote Modesto because we don't have women auxiliaries in Phoenix. So I became part of this one because they did a huge fundraiser, and I want to be part of helping and I volunteer doing that.
So you just felt like there was something in you that wanted to give back and volunteer, and so you were looking for a way to do that. All right. So, and again, I think that women are very easy to gather and mobilize. You just need someone who's going to mobilize them and give them a project. And so why don't you talk to me about some of the projects that you did as the Women's Auxiliary and how you kind of rallied women to do that?
Well, first of all, they talk about all the way you're supposed to do it. And it's a roster. They call it the roster. And it's a president, vice president, and treasurer. So of the auxiliary. And when you have to, I don't even know how to start to talk about how you start one, because when I got there, it was really well established. They had an omelet, they did a lunch, and they already was like 80 women. They got together and did a project, and we also became behind the board and help in all activities in that community that they did. We became behind the officer and helping it. We just kind of like the little ends behind the big projects that everybody does.
So was there one project that you liked more than the others, or you think is the most effective for, if you're gathering women, right, to actually undergird and to come alongside the Salvation Army to volunteer? So these are women from the community that you're gathering together, and so you would meet how often?
We meet once a month, Mondays for lunch, like Salvation Army likes lunch, likes food. So for lunch, and actually when you invite the women to become a women's salary, they have to pay a fee. And we encourage them to be responsible to do the activities that the officers assign us to do. So the one that it comes to mind for me is when I was a president, it was already established, the lunch. And then in San Diego, I heard they did the fashion show, which they did, they still do. It's amazing. And then when somebody invite us, fundraisers. We do one fundraiser a year. The other fundraiser that is, we don't do a lot of things like the board does. We just kind of volunteer women, pretty much retired people that they just wanted to help in the community. So when I went to Pittsburgh, they did a fashion show they did their own garments with plastic bags. And in Vegas, they used to do a tea. I don't think they do it anymore. I'm not sure. So anyway, I don't know why Salvation Army ladies is dying a little bit. So if I asked a couple of my friends, officers, why can I talk about Salvation Army Ladies Auxiliary? And she says, how can we start one? And they told me, if it's one, run with it. Go and find the ladies and be part of it like the other organizations are doing, like the Vice Board. And so you go and volunteer, and you have to be in the meetings within. If it's not one established, I cannot tell you how to start one. And I asked them, and they said, don't bother. So I don't know what to tell you.
Okay, well, I'm going to just take it from there then. For me, like when we were leading the church, and again, for us, every weekend, to make our service run, we had to have 300 volunteers, minimum. So it takes volunteers to make anything go. Right, anything ministry-based. And so the way that you're going to get, whether it's Women's Auxiliary or Echelon or any of them, honestly, the way you're going to get them to go is finding the one person who's got the passion. One person with passion can lead amazing things. So with Women's Auxiliary, it's whether you can think about whether it's a wife of a maybe it's one of the young couples in Echelon, and so it's that wife who can maybe then run with it, or it's the wife of a board member who can actually go, let me just get some of my friends around for lunch. So it's just starting. And sometimes I think we get distracted by the big, and we forget to start small. It's okay to start small. Even the core, every core started small before it got to 50 people and 60. You start small. So you start with kind of what's in your hand. Sometimes I think we get distracted by what's in our heart, so we overlook what's in our hand. And I'm pretty sure God actually honors what's in your hand. So be faithful with what's in your hand. So whatever's in your hand to work with. So it's the people that God brings to you. The people that then you ask and they say yes. So it's starting small, but it's not being afraid to ask. And as far as the women, like the auxiliary, it's less, I guess, cleaning lockers like the Echelon might do, and it's more the fundraising. And they'll rally their friends. Women, like I said, will love together and pay money to do it. So our biggest events at our church were women's events. We could gather women. So I would just be mindful about the discarding or going, it's dying. I would challenge that a little bit. I think the greatest energy lift boost is kind of what the women can bring. So I just want to throw that out there. You got something to say now? Okay, amiga.
Yes, if you get to a place, a community that you send and is one, and you see all these little ladies, and you young people especially, they're going to say, oh, we don't want to deal with all these little ladies. Believe me, those are the ones that they work the hard because they already have the time and the experience. Don't forget that. And then they bring the grandkids, and then they bring the friends and everybody. So we literally get together once a month and talk about all the events in the community, and we volunteers on the Christmas Angels, feeding the homeless, and like my husband and I last a week ago, matter of fact, they call us and they say, you guys, we're making salads for the homeless. Can you come and work? And we went, and guess what it was? All little people. The oldest people. It was not a young people that was going to go volunteer doing things like that. So to me, that group of people is really good for you guys to do the things that other people can't do. And they're happy to help you in any way that you can ask them to help. Oh, the bell ringing is very important too. That way you don't have to pay people to do it because they volunteer to do that. Any other questions?
No, and I like that part because the whole competition thing, it's like you get groups of women around ringing the bell, and who can raise the most money. That listen, winner chicken dinner right there. Well, whatever.
He said that because in Modesto, the women's auxiliary won the competition about 3 times, and the men cheat. You know how they cheat? Because they're business men, so they got the check, but that was cheating.
Oh my gosh, you're a mess. Okay, and I, to her point, I mean, so she was making the thing about the little old ladies, don't discount them, and don't, because they'll be your biggest support. But I also want to, it's a new day, and for those of us who are building God's church, we've been entrusted with a new wineskin, right, in time. Right, COVID kind of became the change, and so we've been entrusted with a new wineskin, and so there's some things we might have to look at a little bit differently. And so with this, for example, it's so maybe lunch meetings aren't going to work because you got a younger crowd. So you're gonna, especially with women, we have jobs and kids and all of that. So you might have So you might have to have the meetings maybe in the afternoon or Saturday morning, or it's just you're going to have to think differently. It can't always be kind of what was as far as, reaching and just like opening the door for a community of women to be gathered. So you kind of sometimes have to think a little bit differently. I think we're about out of time. Is there anything that you would like to add?
No? Do you guys have any question?
Any questions? Everybody need coffee? It's time for the afternoon cafe. All right, so I think we're out of here, but you have to be back, right? You have to be back in here. Hold, please. Hold, please, caller. You have a 15-minute break, but you have to be back in here by 3 o'clock. By 3 o'clock, be back in here for the last hurrah. So make sure you run around the block, go stare at the ocean, do something.